Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the Eurozone on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top updates coming out of the continent this hour. US President Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff travels to Germany to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders for talks on ending the war. The Trump administration pushes for a peace deal by Christmas, though recent talks with Ukraine and Russia show little sign of a breakthrough. 2 people are killed and others injured after a Ukrainian drone strikes a residential building in the Russian city of Saratov, regional officials have said. The governor says the overnight attack caused casualties and damage, with no immediate details on the extent of the injuries. Over the border, Ukraine says Russia uses drones and missiles to strike 2 ports, damaging 3 Turkish-owned vessels, including a ship carrying food supplies. The attack follows Moscow's pledge to retaliate for Kyiv's maritime drone strikes on Russian tankers. Russia says it fires hypersonic missiles at Ukrainian industrial and energy facilities in what it calls retaliation for attacks inside Russia. Ukraine's president says the strikes hit civilian sites and leaves thousands without power across 7 regions. Belgium, Bulgaria, Italy and Malta say they vote in favour of a long-term freeze of Russian assets in an EU procedure. In a joint statement, the 4 countries say any decision to use the assets for Ukraine must be taken at an EU summit. King Charles says his cancer treatment will be reduced next year, citing early diagnosis and effective medical care. The 77-year-old monarch, diagnosed with cancer last February, speaks during a televised address for a British cancer awareness campaign. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un hugs injured soldiers at a Pyongyang ceremony welcoming troops who served with Russian forces in the war in Ukraine. State media says Kim praises the returning 528th Engineer Regiment for what he calls mass heroism during its deployment in Russia's Kursk. French prosecutors seek a life sentence for former Congolese rebel leader Roger Lumbala at a war crimes tribunal in Paris. Lumbala, accused of complicity in crimes against humanity during the Second Congo War, denies the charges, with a verdict due on Monday. Now, according to White House officials, US President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff will meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other European leaders in Berlin this weekend for the latest round of high-level talks on ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz are expected to take part in the meeting. Confirmation of the Witkoff-Zelensky meeting comes days after Ukraine gave the US its revised version of a 20-point peace plan, the latest iteration of a proposal which first emerged in late November and has triggered a flurry of diplomatic activity. Meanwhile, the French presidency has said that Europeans and Ukrainians are asking the United States to provide them with security guarantees before any territorial negotiations in Russian-occupied eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, Trump has stated that a US proposed free economic zone in the Ukraine-controlled parts of the eastern Donbass would work. The United States has suggested creating such an economic zone as a compromise, but has not given further details about the same. Okay, joining us now is Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert and he joins us live from Brussels. Gilbert, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Europe, of course, is demanding these US security guarantees before any Ukrainian territorial concessions. Is this diplomacy, or is it Europe admitting it cannot guarantee Ukraine security on its own?
It is a bit of both. Clearly, the European leaders whom you mentioned Starmer, Macron, and Merz have been the most vocal supporters of Ukraine to the bitter end. That is to say, they are trying every way possible to provide Ukraine with funds that will hold it place in the war through 26 and further. And it is incredible that they believe that they can persuade the Russians to accept Western security guarantees, which means, in fact, Western troops posted in Ukraine. The whole war started over precisely that issue of Ukraine being de facto, if not de jure, a NATO member by having so many personnel and physical infrastructure of NATO brought into Ukraine in the period between 2014 and 2022. So it is very hard to believe that this initiative that from the Europeans and Zelensky will find a welcome recipient in Mr. Witkoff when he meets with them.
Yes, and Gilbert, this idea that US President Donald Trump has put forward about floating a free economic zone in the Donbass. If we're being blunt about this, is this a peace initiative or a backdoor acceptance of Russian control?
I think it's the latter. It is, of course, part of a peace proposal, but in effect, it is a way to square the circle, to force Ukraine and its backers to accept that this territory has been lost to Russia indefinitely, if not permanently, while they have given a chance to press some of their desiderata, what they would like to see. And it may succeed, though it starts out on the back foot when it is linked to the notion of Western troops providing security guarantees.
In terms of the broader spec of these negotiations, do you think from the Kremlin's perspective, the European leaders are aligned with Washington, or are they quietly hedging against Trump's presidency?
Well, I think it's the second. This is a rather sneaky move by the Europeans to have the United States accept what we all know Russia will not agree to, and so to make Russia appear to be the side that is causing the peace talks to fail. It's rather transparent. These leaders have had very ugly telephone conversations with Donald Trump just a few days ago. So it is quite remarkable they persist in pressing points which America will not agree to because they know the Russians will not accept.
Okay, Gilbert, do stay with us as we move over to the battlefield for our next updates. Now, according to Ukrainian officials, Russia has launched fresh attacks on Ukraine's Black Sea ports, damaging 3 Turkish-owned vessels in the Odessa region. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister said Russian strikes hit 2 ports, including Chornomorsk, where a Turkish cargo ship carrying food supplies caught fire after being struck. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the assaults, saying that they prove Moscow does not take diplomatic efforts to end the war seriously and continues targeting civilian logistics and commercial shipping. Following Zelensky's comments, Turkish Foreign Ministry released a statement and expressed strong concern over the attacks, calling for an immediate halt to strikes on ports and maritime infrastructure. Turkey warned that such incidents threaten Black Sea security and risk further escalation. The Turkish-owned vessels reportedly suffered damage, though no crew members were injured. Meanwhile, Ukraine's southern port city of Odessa and surrounding areas were hit by major blackouts after a Russian attack on the power grid. Zelensky added that Russia launched more than 450 drones and 30 missiles, with the heaviest strikes focused on the south and the Odessa region. Ukraine's power grid operator reported widespread outages in Odessa and Mykolaiv, while Ukrainian-controlled parts of Kherson were completely without power. Gilbert, let's start with these these Turkish vessels being hit by Russia today. Do you think Moscow here is deliberately testing NATO's weakest diplomatic link here?
I don't think there was a grand scheme such as you're suggesting. I think this was reciprocal. It was an answer to the Ukrainian maritime drones that were used to attack two oil tankers. These are a shadow fleet of Russia carrying its oil to various markets without European insurance and so forth. Two of such ships were attacked within the last 2 weeks just off the Turkish coast. Then there was a third incident, again, of an attack on a Russian vessel off the Bulgarian coast. So the Russians are responding in kind. They want to make the point that if you are game for maritime war or naval war, we are ready and we will act accordingly. So it is tit for tat rather than a new initiative, a new direction to the war.
Yeah, and Gilbert, of course, we've seen direct talks between Russian and Ukrainian officials in Turkey over the past several months. Turkey, after this, has urged a complete halt to port attacks. Do you think Russia risks losing Ankara as a mediator by possibly ignoring this if it does?
Well, I think that Russia lost Turkey as a mediator some time ago, and not because of Erdogan's various positions, and he's known to be favorable to the Crimeans, for example, as opposed to Russia's hold on the peninsula. So he was useful at a certain point in 2022 during talks that led to a draft peace proposal, which was then vetoed by the Ukrainians following advice from the Brits. It is not so important who is the mediator, where the talks are physically taking place. That is incidental. The bigger issue, of course, is the fate of Ukraine's port cities. I think the Russian interest is not in destroying those port cities, but in taking possession of them. It is clear that if this latest rounds of negotiations end in no progress, and the war effort by the Ukrainians continues, then it is highly likely that the Russians will seize the port of Odessa and end the problem we're describing, because Ukraine will be cut off from the sea.
Gilbert Doctorow, pleasure to have you on the programme. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. We now move on once again to another related development, and according to Regional Governor Roma Bursagin, Ukrainian drones struck the Russian city of Saratov, killing 2 people. Bursagin confirmed the casualties, saying that the attack hit a residential building. Emergency services responded to the scene as authorities assessed the damage. Saratov lies on the Volga River, which is about 625 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, and has faced repeated drone attacks in recent years. Previous strikes have targeted the city's oil refinery and a major nearby airbase, highlighting its strategic importance. Separately, Russia's defense ministry reported that its air defense systems intercepted 41 drones overnight across multiple regions. Russia claims to have downed 28 drones over the Saratov region alone. Now joining us to discuss this is Professor Georgi Toleraya, a professor at the Russian Academy of Science located in Moscow. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Toleraya. It's always a pleasure to have you. Ukrainian drones have reportedly killed civilians in Saratov's major refinery. Does this force Moscow to escalate the war even further, or stay on the same course as previous?
Well, unfortunately, this is nothing new. I think that the latest statistics I've seen that about 800 civilians had been killed by drones in Russia since, the start of the war for the last several months. So this is another needless casualty, which is caused by Ukrainian attacks. And of course, the Ukrainians do so in order to provoke Russia for a harsh response, so that then to run to their European allies saying, see, the Russians are monsters who are attacking our population, please give us money to continue war. That's the real cause and the real cynical aim of these actions. Well, Russia will retaliate, of course, but it's doing so in a planned manner. We unfortunately cannot afford being too much emotional on this. We have to continue the strikes and we have to continue the war until it ends. And the longer Europeans and Ukrainians are trying to prolong the war, the more will be the losses, of course, for the Ukrainian side. And your previous speaker mentioned Odessa. Well, Odessa is, of course, considered. It is a Russian city. It was established by a Russian empire. It's a major cultural center historically of Russia, and one day it will be Russian. Or my suggestion is my idea, which came out of today's stuff, that maybe the compromise could be found in a sort of a free economic zone, or port of Franco, free port for Odessa under control of Russia and maybe some consortium of Western countries to not to make it a base for Ukrainian further aggression. This is just my idea. I'm talking about the possibilities to use Donald Trump idea for joint development of the former Ukrainian territories, and this is maybe one of in the development of such an idea.
Yeah, and Professor Toloraya, these strikes happen deep in Russian territory. Does that signal that Russia's air defences are getting weaker?
Well, I don't think so. I think that the number of the drones the Ukrainians are getting from abroad, from the West, and also ensemble themselves have increased. So they have increased possibilities to broaden the strikes. Saratov is a city quite far from the front line, and that means they have rather capable drones, capable of traveling longer distances. That might be some new type of drones which we have got. So, of course, this is how the armament develops.
Okay, Professor Toloraya, do stay with us as we move from the battlefield and back to diplomacy. Now, Italy, Bulgaria and Malta have joined Belgium's calls for a $246 billion loan to scheme to Ukraine for using the frozen Russian assets. This move threatens to torpedo the EU's goal of agreeing to the reparations loan at next week's EU summit. Meanwhile, in a joint declaration, the four countries have said that they have supported the European Commission's recent proposal to indefinitely immobilise Moscow's sovereign funds held in the European Union. The four countries also cautioned that the move should not preempt any potential to use the cash support Kyiv's war effort. However, the Commission has pushed to immobilise the reserves indefinitely in order to avoid continuing to rely on Hungary's Russia-friendly government to renew the measures every 6 months. Professor Toloraya, several EU states back a long-term freeze of Russian assets inside the 27-member bloc, but want a summit before the decision. How does Moscow read this?
By European politicians and their financial circles, because the Russian central bank have made some demands to the courts to consider this matter, and so the decisions of Russian court are recognized in many countries. So that means that any European property in the third countries, or to be exactly Euroclear property of their assets, may be also frozen as a result in the future. So that's a double-edged sword, and I don't think that will do any good for the European business and European financial circles.
If Russian assets are eventually seized, how do you think Moscow will respond?
Well, there are many methods to return the funds or the equivalent, first through judicial procedure, and then simply by a procedure of seizing the funds and seizing the assets of Europe anywhere in the world.
Yes. And do you think this would permanently kill any future EU-Russia economic relationship, of course, in the years to come?
Well, they're already dead, and we are not so much desperate to renew them. So it depends on Europe, but we won't sacrifice our legal rights and lawful demands just in hope for resumption of economic relations.
Professor Georgi Toleraya, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to get your insight. We now move on, and King Charles has said that his treatment for cancer can be reduced in the next year as he talked about his experience living with the disease. Charles was diagnosed with an unspecified form of cancer last February and made the announcement in a televised broadcast as part of a national cancer awareness campaign in Britain. Let's take a listen in.
Indeed, today I am able to share with you the good news that thanks to early diagnosis, effective intervention and adherence to doctors' orders, my own schedule of cancer treatment can be reduced in the new year.
Well, that's a wrap on today's NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.